From time to time, we will bring you a repeat show. This is an episode from our extensive back catalog, resurfacing some of the ideas and thoughts from the past that we believe are still relevant and well worth revisiting. In this UX Podcast Classic, we learn about the complexities of elevator design. Lots of food for thought and things to keep in mind for the next time we decide to critique an elevator button panel.
UX Podcast Episode 291.
You're listening to UX Podcast, coming to you from Stockholm, Sweden. We are your hosts, James Roy Lawson
and Per Axbom,
with listeners in 175 countries from Sri Lanka to India.
Now, this is an episode that will be valuable to all designers, but also to anyone who has ever ridden in an elevator, or as James would say, a lift. We are joined by Reetta, Ranne and Jussi, Hiltunen, both senior UX design specialists at KONE in Finland.
KONE, I'm going to say KONE, is a global leader in the elevator and escalator industry. And they also work with autowalks, turnstiles, doors, and various different software and applications related to them.
And in this interview, we'll learn more about the research, timelines, life cycles, and cultural challenges of bringing elevators from ideas to buildings. Thank you for joining us. And can you just briefly introduce yourselves and your job titles?
Yes, so I'm Reetta Ranne, and I'm working as a senior user experience specialist. So basically, I'm doing user research in different R&D projects.
I'm Jussi, Hiltunen. I'm designing the user experiences. So started working as a GUI designer, but then this scope has evolved, and nowadays it's the user experience, the field. So really much hands-on design doer, but also having this kind of strategic mindset.
Awesome. So you're a full-scale business all by yourselves, from research to design to delivery.
Something like that.
Why don't you start off by telling us what's a typical design process for one of the lifts that we climb into?
That's a good question. I think it follows pretty much the industry standards in a way that the design process is what you have in other research and development environment. So of course we start from the inside of the customer and inside of the user need, and then developing concepts, prototyping those with the customers and users, and testing out that was it really the thing what they wanted, and it goes to the implementation. And in brief, when we are in the global business, then this kind of local variations are good to understand. So everything should be thought from the local needs point of view, but then globalize it, somehow productize the solutions so that we are able to adapt to those local needs. When you think about the users of the lifts, also you can think that there are quite many of us who are using the lifts. So millions and millions of users, which are coming from different backgrounds, from different cultures.
Yeah, and I guess many times the lift is not that important to people. They don't really want to be like, their goal is not to just use the lift.
Yeah, exactly.
But instead they are in a building which is some certain kind of building. So, for example, a residential building, and they're coming there, and their goal is to get to their home, or visiting their friend, or going in a retail center to some shop.
So these journeys are important part from the UX point of view. We are basing to this user journeys, like in other industries also. And of course, then these touch points, something what we are focusing on, and then making some solution throughout the whole journey. And then the journey has been actually, from our point of view, kind of extending later years quite much. And also from the company point of view, we are doing people flow solutions inside the building and also in between the buildings. So also more than just the elevator, what we are thinking of as a complete solution.
Yeah, of course, because you've got the interface you use to trigger a part of the journey. But when you're planning the elevators and lifts in a building, then the level of, or the flow of people and the quantity of people at various stages across the entire journey is crucial for the experience of, well, has the lift worked to get me where I wanted in a timely fashion?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, at the same time, we're interested in a user experience of a single person and how easy and smooth it is for one person to use an elevator in a building. But at the same time, we need to be thinking about like all the people in the building and how when they are in a crowd coming in or moving in between the floors, how smoothly that goes. So we need to tackle these both kind of problems.
Yeah, I love how complicated you now are describing that this process is, because now you're realizing it's not just a box with buttons, is it? Because that's what you always think that it's a box with buttons. How different can it be? But then you're talking about localized versions, flows. You're saying that basically the elevator is like Google. You don't really want to use Google. You want to find what Google gives you. You want to go somewhere else. So I see the elevators now as being the Google. The physical representation of Google. So, but why are we so upset with elevators then in the UX industry? I mean, is it common for people to be upset in general, or is it something that you think designers especially are when it comes to these physical objects?
Can you actually elaborate more? That what are you upset? Mostly.
Oh, you don't set us off. No, so you'll get a list.
Shoot.
Well, usually it's just that simple. The thing we look at is the interface with the buttons. And sometimes the interface is outside the elevators. You walk inside the elevator and you go, oh my God, I forgot to press the floor. Why would it be outside? Why isn't the same everywhere? Why are some buttons placed horizontally and not vertically? Why are the numbers different? Why is the 13 missing, but it's where it should have been a 12, but it should have been up on the 4? It's just, there are so many ways the buttons can go wrong. And sometimes there's this close lift or close doors button. Sometimes that doesn't make it any shorter in time. It's just a dead button that people
press. Or sometimes you go into the elevator and you can't see screens because they're placed at an angle which is not visible from the entire lift. There's this. It kind of feels like there's always something when you go into an elevator that kind of triggers your UX spider sense.
Yeah, and I guess one aspect is also that at the same time we have those new systems and user interfaces, and then we have those elevators that are 100 years old, and we have all these at the same time. So the whole technology is not like changing so rapidly as you might see in other industries as well. So we are seeing like all the stages and all the from different tryouts that there has been throughout the years at the same time, and then you just have to switch between those different ways of interacting with the elevator.
Yeah, I mean, how long is the kind of normal lifespan of an elevator interface in one that's installed?
That's one core question, I think, in this. When we think about the life cycle, then earlier, the lifespan of the lift has been much longer. It can be, you can find those 100-year-old lifts in use. Of course, they might be modernized and so on. But when also buildings are changing in a faster and faster pace nowadays, so like offices are turned into hotels or vice versa, or then the offices needs to be renovated more frequently, then also this solution should be much more modular so that we are able to keep up with the user and customer needs so that the tenants who are moving in, they are able to get their service levels right. And so, but coming back to this standard solution, which you were in a way referring to earlier, that why there is so many variants. When we think also globally, there are these kind of local standards which are already setting some rules for the interfaces, that what kind of indications needs to be in with what kind of technology and in what location of the building. So they are varying a little bit, and they are also making it difficult to have just one interface which fits for all. But then again, like the code-based solutions also, they are not necessarily the best solutions. They are standardized, but then there are huge usability issues in those. So, but when you are making a code-compliant solution, like customer may want to have that because that's in a way good for all. For anyway, setting some sort of bar for the accessibility issues and somehow inclusive solutions. But you could do so much better when you can go beyond those standards, and that's in a way the dilemma what we are often facing, that the customer needs and user needs are actually something more than these standard solutions are able to fulfill. And
and many times the codes are for all the buildings, and I would like to more see how to respond to the user needs of different building segments. So, for example, in the office, if you work there every day and you go there every day, you're optimizing your routes, you're taking the shortcuts. So you want totally different kinds of information than, for example, when you're in a hotel and then you try to find your hotel room and you haven't been there before. So it's totally different thing. And these codes are trying to get all the different kinds of buildings to like have a one solution that fits all, and it has to be a compromise in some sort.
Do you get chance to work with the implementation projects? I mean, it's one thing designing the kind of global solutions, but do you get to work closely with the people who are actually going to do the final details of the lift that's going to be in the building?
Yeah, sometimes we are working more closely, and then sometimes more distantly, but it's always good to have some piloting cases where you are really seeing the reality, and of course we are doing lots of site visits, like we were now popping in China, for example, and then you see the reality that what are those, where are those actually placed, and how they function. But
I mean, we talk a lot about in the web design world, we're talking a lot about design systems and style guides and so on. I mean, do you provide a design system for implementation teams?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think that those are provided and by the implementation teams. The processes are quite complex in this kind of building industry, and that. Yes, there are guidelines for that, how things should be installed and what kind of configurations you have, and so on. Of course, the most important thing probably for this solution is that what kind of decision the customer has made. And in building industry, it may take years to really have the building in use after the planning session. So the initial plan might have come from developer who has then subcontracted constructor who have selected based on some rules or parameters the solution, and if it's not an educated choice that there would be also the user's point of view taken, then it might be something that you get angry with as a user, because the customer who make the choice may not ever even step into that ready-made building, and therefore it might be quite distant for them, and it's really important to share the knowledge of the user's needs and make better solutions, and then of course the installation on site then makes the final touch to that we get good system running.
This makes me think of when Jared Spool is saying that everyone is a designer. I mean, you can only go so far, but then somebody else has to interpret what you're giving them if you're giving them these guidelines, and then years have passed and people don't think that it's important anymore maybe, and then so maybe it really comes down to how well are you able to communicate to the people who actually install it in the end.
It is really important, communication in general. Because people have different point of views, and they may be experts on one side, and it's in the building industry there are tough regulations of the responsibilities, and those are definitely something that they need to think of. But then this user needs that you could in a way increase the quality of the user experience. It may be often or sometimes nice to have in that point when you are making a decision, and there is in the other end the quality or the cost or easiness of installation or durability or vandal proofness or something like that. Then there are lots of things to consider from the responsibility point of view.
You did talk about pilots, and how do you even do research around a specific design? I mean, do you have buildings where you're testing?
I hope they say that they've got giant cardboard boxes and they lift cardboard boxes around. That'd be so cool.
I would love the cardboard boxes.
We actually have a test shaft in Tuturi, which is 300 meters, but it goes below the ground. In Finland, everything is quite flat here, but it's also we are testing out different user interfaces, or could be just different icons or different parts of user interfaces. So it's not always the like real functioning setup, but then as well, we have these kind of pilot sites where we go and observe, and we might just like otherwise try to understand better certain kind of building segment. So go in different kind of, for example, shopping centers to see how people are moving there and what kind of things are affecting them.
And then lots of prototyping, and you can set up those kind of environments also in odd places, but it really helps to get further with the development. And then of course talking about the research, then these kind of trends like mega trends and understanding of where the urban life is going to, and what does these technological disruptions make, and of course those needs to be then thought locally and globally, like to understand that.
Yeah, because of course, if you're in a situation like you guys, that you're when a building starts to exist, it's in the planning stage, and it can exist as plans for 2-3 years, as you said, before you even decide which lift manufacturer is going to be involved on the project to deliver the solution. So you guys, I guess, have got to be always at least 3 to 5 years ahead in what solutions you're thinking about, because the buildings that you're going to put them in are 3 or 5 years forward.
Yeah, exactly. And at some point there might be some modernizations. So you might modernize different parts of an elevator. So it's not just about the elevator car that you see. There might be many things modernized on the background. But then as well, you could be modernizing the user interfaces. And then, of course, it's not so big cycle. But that's true that it's many times years before when these plans are made of how it should look. So it's challenging.
And like also being realistic of that you cannot know that what is going to happen in a couple of years. Nowadays it's even harder. So in a way, making platforms and modular systems which enable these kind of adjustments afterward, like upgrade or update, then maybe wiser and maybe more future-proof than try to do something which is somehow emerging currently and might not be that might be still somehow having maybe diseases when it's out in the market.
Exactly. So, but what are the trends? What do you talk about at these high-tech elevator conferences? What's happening in the future? Because I imagine all these elevators greeting me with good morning and using my name and knowing beforehand what floor I want to go to, because that's the floor I usually go to. And I mean, where are we headed?
These businesses are changing, like you know very well, that for example, in retail, the shopping centers are having a different role than earlier they used to be. So, for example, companies like Amazon are changing the way people are buying things. So these shopping centers are more like social hubs. Hotels need to have more and more experiences to entertain or make their guests' life convenient, and offices are more like a mindset than spaces. So it's quite mobile world where we are heading to, and where we are now also having these kind of telcos or video conferences are pretty easy nowadays. But yeah, I think you are pretty up to date of the trends. What's happening in technological side? So those are of course considered in our business also.
I've got at least 2 more questions that I've got to pose to you guys. One of them is when you were interviewed for your jobs, did you have to do the infamous Google 1,000-floor elevator challenge?
What is that?
You don't know what it is? Okay, so it's one of these. It's an infamous design challenge that Google gives to people during the interview, where they pose the questions like, you've got to design an elevator interface for a building with 1,000 floors. So if you search for that, there's thousands of articles, and people have done these challenges and come up with interfaces.
Yeah, right. Maybe I should suggest that we could have that next time. But if there are good solutions already available, then yeah. But yeah, no, I didn't have that. Did you have, Reetta?
I would be just observing the different kinds of user interfaces that people are making and pointing out things, how to improve them.
I've not actually myself done the 1,000-floor elevator challenge. But it does sound wonderfully mean to ask someone to design something which is almost certainly impossible.
I have done a variant of it actually at an adaptive path course in Berlin, where they gave us constraints as we were going along in the workshop. So yeah, build the elevator interface. No, now it has to be 1,000 floors. So they changed it all the time. They changed other things as well, so it made it more and more difficult.
Yeah, I would be interesting on like which kind of building is this? What do we know about the users there? What do we know about the floors? What different things are there in different floors? How people are thought that how would they use this building? How are they coming to that building? What are they doing in between those days when they are there, or the hours or minutes? Why do they come here?
Some of the lifts which have 100 floors, you may enter in 3 of those, the top one and the couple of from the ground side. So it could be also asked that do you need to enter all of those floors?
So you've both got the job basically, because one of the things that I don't like about that challenge is that it just dives straight into the interaction design and doesn't consider what we as UXers would think of the important understandings, the important bits of information we need to know about the situation in order to design it. I had another question, and that was, I've been asked to ask this one. That Per mentioned at the beginning, and it was the door closing, door opening buttons, right?
Yeah.
The whole thing about whether they're real or not. and someone actually posted a picture of one where the closed doors button had fallen off, revealing it was just stuck on. So I'd like you two to put this finally to sleep and say, the closed door button, does it work?
You know, it's surprising that how commonly it is used in China, for example, that how fast they find it and how passionate they are using it. So in Europe, I don't see that kind of passion like in China, which is interesting. This already this mindset of maybe this kind of impatience in those situations then makes it actually really important. But yeah, for designing for those buttons, I think you need to think of the overall context and the more holistic approach than just the button itself. But yeah, it would be nice that it's somehow adapting to the context, so that.
You are avoiding that.
I think in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to worry about doors closing or opening buttons because everything would be understandable and easy. So if there are people coming who need to come to an elevator, then the doors will stay open. And if they're all set, then they can go. And nobody feels like they are left outside an elevator that they wanted to take.
But
nice. So, you guys are so good at your jobs, because what you're basically saying then is that even that people feel that there's a need for such a button is a design failure.
Yeah, I think that the need is somewhere else than getting the door closed or open. I think the need is not to be rude to people so that the doors will get closed in front of them. I think the need is to go along with your friend if you're going, even if you're going to separate floors, so that you can go there together. I think the need is that if I have been standing here for quite a long time, it would be really nice to get the elevator and go to my.
I think it's really nice that you brought up the cultural aspect, or brought us back to the cultural aspect that in some cultures that get on with it, close the doors is a much more important part of the experience than it would be in other cultures.
And it's understandable also, and
another
there is no right or wrong, but in a way, would be nice to, even though we wouldn't be in that perfect world like Reetta was describing, but that if there would be this kind of moment that you see somebody is coming to the lift and the door starts closing, and then you who are in the lift are able to quickly just open the door, and you are the hero who is friendly and opening for that person who is coming in, and it's in a way magical moment what you can have in a lift. So
we've even got the story arc now for elevators. That's lovely.
it's somehow still somehow humane to have these kind of features there for surprising moments.
Features for surprising. I love that ending. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. I mean, I've learned a lot today.
Thanks a lot for that.
Thanks for having us.
I have to say, I so enjoyed talking to Reetta and Jussi because I mean, you can imagine stuff, but because you and I talk about elevators so much, and the people in the design industry talk about elevators so much, but you never think about that it is the exact, of course, same design process that we all use. But then there are all these challenges that we don't have, like the life cycle and the process of actually getting them from paper to being implemented, with like saying 2 to 3 years, and staying ahead and predicting the future, because what you design today will live on for so many years in the future. And I think we actually more, even in the digital design industry, should learn from that and be prepared to build stuff that will have a longer
well, yeah, I mean, yeah,
life.
this is more traditional product design or kind of, yeah, not digital design, but at the same time it does have digital elements. But I mean, I've suspected that one of the challenges with lifts was the life cycle aspect. You know that.
Yeah, and so many people being involved across. That
yeah, I mean, we know that from, you go into an old building here in Stockholm, some of the lovely buildings from almost 100 years ago, and they're fantastic lifts, but they're still there, and they still have the same interface as they did. Well, some of them from the beginning, or they've maybe been changed out in the maybe 40 years ago or something. But there's such huge time scales that we're involved in, which is one aspect. But then, as we brought up there, that when a building's drawn by someone, an architect, then some of the big buildings, this can be several years before they even start putting a spade into the ground and digging foundations.
Right, and even then the building plans change, and even who the tenant of that building is will change. So even the research will be wrong based on if they get the tenant wrong. Because, I mean, I hadn't thought about all the differences that are between, shopping centers, office buildings, residential buildings, hotels. And then Jussi was saying, well, how people actually move around in a shopping center is changing now, because they're more social hubs, and people are having coffee rather than shopping as much as they did before, because they do so much shopping online. So even that affects the design of the elevator. That kind of blew my mind.
Are you confessing now that you didn't think about context when it came to using lifts?
Yeah, not enough.
Yeah.
Not enough. Not that they're thinking about how shopping center behavior changes across years in the future, and that will affect the design of the elevator in critical ways.
Obviously, I mean, hotels is one of those challenges where you've got there you've got an international context in many hotels, but a local culture who is building the hotel. So that's
exactly.
that's a challenge. I was surprised, actually. I think there's a business opportunity here for KONE. That I was surprised about how they weren't regularly involved. It sounded as being like consultants in the planning stages, in the architect stages. Because we talked about being, we always talk about being included early on, and the more various competences you include in a project earlier, the more increased chance of success you have. And here they lifted up one of the challenges being that by the time the implementation comes to happen, they're implementing modules, a modular-based transport system, and their design work has been done and the research has been done long before as a module thing. Whereas if they could come in the planning stage and sit in some of those meetings and talk to them and say, well, if you move the elevator there, or do this there, or think about this flow, or do that, then maybe that's going to be more successful. Or maybe they do it, we just didn't ask the right question.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't have a long enough interview. But also, I'm thinking that this interview will actually help me describe what I do to other people, because it's so easy for people to relate to elevators. So describing the process in the sense that it relates to the process I'm working with will make people understand this is how we work. And even when Jussi was talking about modular systems, and that's one way of solving this long life cycle problem, that relates to atomic design and Brad Frost for me. And even, do I want the elevator to know my name? Do I want the elevator to speak to me? And that's GDPR, that's ethics. Everything can be related to some part of what we're doing in the digital world as well. It's really interesting. And I loved how Reetta was saying that the door close button that you were asking about, it's actually the wrong solution to a problem that should be solved in another way.
Potentially, yes. Yeah, the lift should be the lift should have more empathy. As in
Exactly.
more feeling for the situation, and like not to close the door on your friend as your friend is coming up to the lift to join you in it to go up to your apartment or something. There's there's a lot of wonderful aspects to this, but I think we talk about experiments and pushing out experiments and getting things in the browser quickly. Here, yes, okay, they've got a test shaft. I mean, wouldn't you love to have a test shaft, Per? but when their experiments go out, they're not just switched with an A/B. It's not an A/B test. You don't A/B test elevators. You don't kind of like switch it out after 2 weeks to something else. Okay, you can change the software, but some of the hardware side of stuff, I mean, it's not going to be possible to alter, as we said, for maybe 40 years or more.
Right.
So that's a fascinating challenge.
Yeah, and that's why Jussi was talking about modular systems,
Yes.
where you actually can change hardware. And that's when I realized also, of course, and they're probably using some buttons they're using them because they have some over the builders. Because, I mean, it's cheaper to use something that's already there that you have already bought than to use the design solution.
Yeah.
In some cases.
Yeah, you're exactly. This is this is the thing where because they've gone modular and because you've got constructors who are going to be fitting fitters who are actually putting the lift in place, they're going to have this box of Lego, and so they're taking design decision. They're making design decisions at that point as well. So there's another opportunity for KONE to do some consulting work. They can come in there and kind of usability test the elevators at the end.
I would love myself to do a usability test of elevators.
So ring in if you want us to go out and test your elevator.
Oh, that's excellent. We should actually have people call in and ask for stuff like that.
Please subscribe to the show if you don't already, and feel free to dip your toes into our back catalogue. Links related to this episode will be on uxpodcast.com if you can't reach them from wherever you're listening now. And we also send them out as part of our backstage email, so you can sign up for that at uxpodcast.com/backstage. Thank you for spending some time with us.
Remember to keep moving.
See you on the other side.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Mike Sniffer Pippets.
Mike Sniffer Pippets who?
Oh, come on. How many Mike Sniffer Pippets do you know? Now let me in. It's cold out here.